I'm rewatching Outlander starting with season 1, and I wanted to talk about this scene when Frank spots Jamie's ghost for the first time. Even now, this is still one of the most mysterious and highly debated scenes in all of Outlander. As always, if you are looking to avoid spoilers from the books or the show, please do keep on scrolling. Alright, so this is the first time that we as viewers and Frank see Jamie for the very first time. Granted, this is a ghost version of Jamie, it's not a living, breathing version of Jamie, but it is our first scene with him in it. In the show, this scene happens about midway through episode 1 when Frank is walking back to the bed and breakfast that Claire and him are staying at up in Inverness in the Highlands. It's dark, it's raining, and Claire sees this figure in full Highland dress standing under a street lamp looking up at Claire. When Frank approaches the man, he asks him if he can help him with something, and suddenly he disappears. He turns his back to him, walks past him, and in a flash of lightning, we see that he has disappeared into thin air, which is then followed up by Claire asking him if he might have seen a ghost and him saying that he's not entirely sure he hasn't. It definitely has an implication that something otherworldly has happened, and for someone as literal as Frank to question if that person was actually there standing with him, it draws you in as a viewer. In the books, this scene plays out very similarly, but there are a few key differences that I think add almost a little more romance to the interaction. And once again, this scene is told entirely in Claire's point of view, so we spend more time with her in the room waiting for Frank's return. Frank had left the room to go meet with a man named Mr. Bainbridge, and Claire notes that there was no water left in the ewer and busies herself while Frank is outside watching Jamie's ghost. So we really only are seeing Claire's POV for much of this scene. So then when Frank does come back into the room and Claire starts asking him about the interaction, we get a little bit more of a flushed out conversation between the two of them, something that the show condensed a lot. And because that conversation is a little more fleshed out, we get smaller nuances that give us insight into the dynamic of their relationship. So she offers Frank some whiskey, and he looks at her accusingly when there was no water left in the ewer, and she has to say, "Don't look at me, you're the one who used all of the water. I don't mind it neat though." So it's another interaction where you can tell that Frank's immediate gut reaction is to blame her for things, which is obviously in direct contrast to Jamie and her and their relationship later on in the story. When Frank tells Claire that he observed the man looking up at Claire's window, she actually gets a little uneasy about that and gets up to close the window, even though she realizes it's a little late for that. And Frank says that he could see her in the window brushing her hair, which we do get in the show as well. Then in the books, Frank says that the man looked like he was terribly unhappy about something. Not that he could see his face, but that his body language and something about the way he stood when he came up behind him, he acted like he didn't hear me, perhaps because he didn't. So he repeated himself, and when he tapped his shoulder, the man suddenly rushed around past him and walked off down the road. Frank notes how sizable the man was and that he was dressed in a full Highland rig out with a sporran and a brooch, and he remembers thinking that he wanted to ask him where he got it from, but then he was gone before he had the chance. Claire then notes that it's probably not that abnormal for someone in that area of the Highlands to dress that way, and Frank agrees, but he says the oddest part is that he should have felt him push past him when he walked by, but he didn't. And when he turned around to look for him down the road, he had been gone. He also notes that it was windy outside when he was observing this man, but the man's kilts and plaid never moved. So it was only his walking that made his clothing move, but not the weather outside, which is also something that gave him a chill up his spine. The second half of their conversation plays out very similarly, book and show, where Frank asks Claire if there might have been a Scottish man that she cared for during the war that might be coming back trying to find her or strike up a conversation again after they may have had some sort of a interaction or romance while she was a caretaker and a nurse in the war. And Frank chooses then to remind Claire that they had not seen each other for 6 years. They only saw each other 3 times in that span, and the last time they saw each other, it was only for a day. So in his mind, it wouldn't be unusual if she had sought comfort in somebody else. Now in the show, Claire's reaction to this is much more sympathetic towards Frank, something that I've talked about before, in that his betrayal in the show is far more sympathetic than I think we get in the books. She kind of lashes back out at Frank in the book scenario where she asks, "Do you really think I've been unfaithful to you? Because if you have, you can leave this room right now." And when he tries to soothe her, she yells at him, "Don't touch me." He instantly tries to de-escalate the situation by saying, "Of course not, I could never believe that," and asks for her to forgive him. And in the show, she immediately forgives him, but in the books, she actually has this very zingy line where she says, "The quality of mercy is not strange, it droppeth as gentle as dew from heaven." And Frank says, "If that's you showing mercy, I'd hate to see you showing vengeance." This scene in the show ends with the two of them sleeping together once again and trying to draw each other closer, which Claire's monologue kind of implies. But in the books, this is the first seed planted in Claire's brain where she thinks that Frank probably did be unfaithful to her in that span of 6 years, because she remembers there was no evidence on her part to imply that she had been unfaithful. But 6 years, as Frank said, was a very long time, and Claire realizes that she wouldn't necessarily put it past him to act in the way that he was just accusing her of acting. Now, I do think these earlier episodes of the show do a very good job of translating the books, but as per usual, there are always little tidbits that are left out in the show medium that the books do have in there. So this was just one example of that, where I thought there was a lot more context to this scene in the books that the show doesn't necessarily make very obvious to the reader, specifically that Claire has a seed of doubt planted in this moment of Frank being faithful to her, which will come up again and again, especially in season 3.